Welcome everyone to the Vinyl Brotherhood, where we like to kick back, take it easy, and just chat about music, whether it be the latest and greatest new releases or old favorites from years gone by. Guess what? White Reaper has released their fourth album, titled Asking for a Ride. I know 4 albums, I can hardly believe it myself, but we have a great review planned for you today. So sit back, relax, maybe relax those shoulders, breathe in, breathe out, get comfortable, because it's going to be a great time, and I can't wait to discuss this record with you. What's good, fam? I'm constantly surprised at how time flies, but White Reaper has been around for something like a decade now. I can't say I was an early adopter, but I did hop on shortly after the release of their first album, White Reaper Does It Again. The music world became quickly enamored with their sugary melodies, crunchy guitarists, and cheeky attitudes, and they're definitely the real deal. I saw them play their no-nonsense rock and roll to a small crowd a few years back, and they crushed it, and it's been a delight keeping up with their story, and now I find myself here with their fourth album, Asking for a Ride. They released it officially back in late January, but the vinyl record release was delayed for a good while. And alas, here it is, and I can't wait to dive in with you all, our faithful audience. These dudes know how to write a hook, and they've delivered a good handful of killer tunes on their last 3 studio LPs, such as Judy French, Friday the 13th, and Might Be Right. And I'm looking forward to adding perhaps a couple more to the playlist, so let's not waste any more time. Right, taking a glance at our album artwork, we get a cool illustration style that we don't see all that much of these days, but I'm glad they're doing it. And it features some fictional icons, if you will, including the Cerberus, Cyclops, Poseidon, a tornado, which feels a little close to home as we were literally under a tornado watch in my area about an hour ago. But you know, it is what it is. And there's the album title, Asking for a Ride. On the back, we have a cool logo mark. You probably can't see it on the camera from this far away, but it's pretty neat. And let me show you the sleeve. Yeah, they've got their WR logo on it, and that's a really nice touch. Pretty cool that they did that. So White Reaper is made up of Tony Esposito on vocals and guitars, Hunter Thompson on guitars, 2 brothers, Sam and Nick Wilkerson, taking care of the rhythm section, and Ryan Hayter on keyboards. The self-titled White Reaper EP dropped in 2014, sounding like a lost rock and roll record from 1979, recorded in a stuffy garage on a summer evening, and every subsequent release has found the band becoming just a little bit more clear and crisp and ready to take on the masses. Sounding bigger and more refined than ever, the self-proclaimed world's greatest American band sounds ready to take on arenas. And well, in actuality, they've become festival staples and have played alongside huge acts such as Weezer, who at times feels like a spiritual predecessor to White Reaper, them or Cheap Trick maybe. And the hooks they've reliably delivered certainly feel worthy of the stadium treatment. So now I'm curious as to what kind of tunes this rising rock act can churn out whilst escalating the ladder to rock stardom. Well, generally speaking, it seems like these songs were made with such settings in mind. In the past, White Reaper has flirted with metal, but this time around they actually kind of lean in and give it a little peck on the cheek. We hear that mostly in the first track, being the title track, and just a little bit in its follow-up, Bozo, pairing nicely with White Reaper's traditional 70s hard rock flair. They enthusiastically pull out all the stops with riffs galore and fiery guitar solos, and you can tell they're having a lot of fun here. It's very much palpable. And they're clearly showing off a little bit, and I welcome that flamboyance with open arms. However, I am slightly conflicted about a little something. After repeat listens, I can't quite decide whether the metal veneer is a little more than a gimmick. it kind of feels that way. Like I said, I'm always down with some shredding, but a part of me can't help but feel or think that these were conceived as typical power pop songs and just dressed up in those metal stylings. A bit more on that later, so stay tuned. A little more in familiar territory, we get the glam influenced number Fog Machine. Now, if White Reaper is flirting with metal, they've at least taken glam rock to dinner with the parents. It's a big part of their sound, and you can even hear it as far back as the first album on songs like Don't You Think I Know and Candy. And it's even more prominent on their subsequent albums. And so yeah, shifting it to another big 1980s subgenre, Getting in Trouble with the Boss finds itself sort of on the other side of glam, or maybe the adjacent dance punk a la Billy Idol. The big bubblegum chorus nicely offsets the grittier verses, and I don't need to tell fans how solid these guys are with melody. They've got a seemingly endless stash of vocal hooks that rarely fall flat on this album as well as the others, and I'm personally a little envious, as vocal parts are usually where I find myself struggling as a songwriter, but they make it look easy. Funny Farm and Pink Slip blaze by, reminding us how easily White Reaper could have been a punk pop band. They've always had that angst and that energy about them, and once upon a time their music even took on that aesthetic, an aspect of their sound that I dearly miss. And it's at this point that I must let you know how much I missed Ryan Hayter's 70s roller rink keyboards, which don't feature quite as prominently on Asking for a Ride. Doesn't meld too well with the Metallica riffs, I guess. The Wilkerson Bros hold down a strong and steady rhythm on Heaven or Not. It's a cool song and probably the closest thing we'll ever get to a White Reaper ballad, unless I'm forgetting something off of You Deserve Love, an album I clearly haven't given enough attention. Crawl Space and Thorn don't make the biggest impression, and even after repeat listens, but in the moment, I can't help but be reminded how much this band seems to cater to my musical preferences, and there's plenty there musically to soak in, even if the latter half of the album isn't really as easy to absorb. Both those songs feature guitar passages that sound vaguely familiar, as if being passed down from a great rock and roll tradition. With verses that are more sparse in instrumentation, the band is given opportunities to construct a nice backdrop for everything else, and this is when we get to hear where some of the big bucks went, where You Deserve Love sounded very polished, probably to a fault a lot of the time. Asking for a Ride seems to be consciously adding back in some of that grit while aiming for something even bigger sonically. The whole album sounds pretty slick for the most part, but yet some areas don't quite translate to the high-end treatment, feeling either overdone or undercooked, like some of the guitars on Pages. If I recall correctly, Pages was the first single, and it made for a really good one. In the context of the album, it makes for a suitable ending despite being more or less standard White Reaper, but it eases us into the final moments, and the chorus is catchy as heck, so I'm cool with it. The rare use of acoustic guitar feels fitting for a song about heartbreak, in which Tony tears out the pages of his diary, chronicling a past relationship, and the image of him owning a diary in the first place feels about as throwback as their 70s, 80s hard rock sound. Now to address what I hinted at earlier, there is a solid variety of different styles and influences being utilized on Asking for a Ride, and to their credit, nothing sounds super out of place, and it all makes sense within the White Reaper canon, but I take slight issue with the writing on a more fundamental level. In terms of song structure and contour and range and all that good stuff, this album felt somewhat limited to me, a little heavier on the frills and on the thrills, if you will. 4 albums deep, I'm starting to get the sense that the band is beginning to work themselves into a corner. In these brief 30 minutes, I was picking up on melodies that felt a little too familiar to their older work. The songs are more or less all standard ABAB-CAB fare, and the album speeds by with very little dynamic range, from tempo down to Tony's vocals that rarely break out from like the 7 to 8 on the punk rock energy scale. Next time around, I'd like to see White Reaper push themselves a bit more and write songs they haven't already written, essentially. To use their words from the song Bozo, it certainly does feel like new frames on the same old vision. They went super creative somewhere around step 2 or step 3, but we need them to possibly spend some more time on step 1. That being said, if you show up with the proper expectations, chances are White Reaper fans won't be too disappointed. Although it didn't really set my world on fire, I've come to have a deeper appreciation for Asking for a Ride than I did when it released back in January. It's a short and sweet album experience, and honestly, I think it's best appreciated as a whole album experience. I don't necessarily envision myself turning to it for massive landmark individual tunes the way I do their other 3 records, and that's okay. It's still a worthy addition and such an easy listen. I can't imagine even casual listeners will take much issue with it. It's just a fun time. So there you have it. I guess that all there is left to do is give this album a proper score so I can close this out. So let's head back. So did White Reaper do it again? Well, with musical influences even more apparent on their sleeves, as they further abandon their garagey lo-fi roots, White Reaper's reach seems to get even broader and broader. With choruses and solos as the kind they can produce with perfect ease, they deserve as big an audience as they can get. My only fear is that their output could risk becoming more sterile, predictable, and not as fresh as it was back in 2014. Let's hope they soon grow past the reliance on pastiche and the tried and true the next go round. But for now, their 4th album, Asking for a Ride, is still a nice little diversion here in the first half of 2023. I think I'm ready to give it a score of 6.5 out of 10 today. It's a good album that does what it sets out to do. White Reaper is here to roll out the good times, and it clearly comes natural to them. And if you'd like to keep enjoying the good times, then please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Vinyl Brotherhood, and we'll keep the music reviews coming and more. Whether you agree or disagree, I'd love to hear from you all in the comments. You've all been a very insightful and generally kind group of folks. We're extremely grateful that you took the time to watch. And with that, I guess we can wrap things up. To all my vinyl guys and vinyl gals, I hope the days ahead are all good ones, and we will see you again very soon right here at the Vinyl Brotherhood.